Step 3 of the integrated learning process is increasing your vocabulary. This is one of the most exciting steps in the integrated learning system because this is where it all starts to happen. This is where you learn new words in English, and learning new words is important because how are you going to understand what people say if you don't know the words they're using? And how are you going to speak if you don't know the right words to express yourself? So now that you've read your text, you've listened to it, we're going to learn the words that you don't yet know to begin increasing your comprehension. This is what's going to help you understand everything you read and listened to in the text. And if you do this continuously, adding new vocabulary to your knowledge bank, then you will reach the point where you will understand most of what you hear in English. So let's talk about the steps for increasing your vocabulary. The first thing you're going to do is guess the meanings of the word you highlighted. Then you're going to compare your text to the original to see if those words that you guessed were correct or not. And if you're still not sure, you can check with a translator or look up the meaning in a dictionary. And then finally, you're going to write those words down so that you can review them later. Because if you don't review the new vocabulary words that you're learning, you'll forget them quickly. So reviewing them frequently is important so that you can assimilate them and make them a part of your personal word bank in English. So let's talk about step 1, guessing the meanings of the words you highlighted. Now this is really simple. All you have to do is place parentheses after the word and then write down what you think it means. So you remember those words that you marked as interesting, the words that you didn't know, that you made bold, the words that you thought you'd seen before but you couldn't remember the meaning, that you italicized, or the words that you knew but seemed different in context that you underline. So now, after each of those words, you're going to go back through, place a parenthesis around them, and guess what you think that word means and write it in the parentheses. This is important because later, as you come back through, you'll see which words you really knew, which ones you didn't, and you can even study them later so you don't always have to look them up in a dictionary. So let me show you an example from one of my French lessons. Okay, so you can see here that I have several words in bold, some are underlined, some are in red, some are highlighted yellow. And after them, I placed these parentheses. Actually, I used brackets here. And so I saw the word I'd never seen before, and I wrote what I thought it meant from the context. So this is from Genesis 4. I knew that Abel was a sheepkeeper or a shepherd, so I wrote that in here. So even though I didn't know the word, I'd never seen it before in French, I still could guess what I thought it meant. Same thing with this word. I knew that Cain was a tiller or a farmer, so I wrote that in here. Then you can see that there are words that even though I had a general idea of what the text was saying, I still didn't know what that individual word meant. Like this one here, or this one, and this one. I had no idea what they were. I couldn't even guess, so I just left them blank until I could get to a translator and dictionary to learn them. So that's what you're going to do here. Put parentheses or brackets around the word and guess what it means and write that in if you can. Then later, you're going to go and check them. Then in the next step, you're going to go check them to see if what you guessed was correct, and you're going to learn the words that you don't, and you're going to learn the words that you really don't know. So now that you've gone through and guessed the words that you thought you knew or could try to guess, you're going to go and compare your text in English with the original text in your mother tongue. Now this is if you have it, of course. You may not always have the text translated into your mother tongue. If not, that's okay. Just move on to the next step. But if you have the translation from what you're studying in English, it's extremely helpful because it will give you instant feedback on what you're reading and hearing. So if you have the text in English and you have the same text in your mother tongue and you can compare those words that you didn't know in English with the same text in your mother tongue, it'll give you a great translation. This is great if you're using audiobooks like popular novels, like the Twilight series. You can get a copy in English and in your mother tongue. Or if you're reading podcasts and watching videos on TED, where you can get the transcripts in English and in your mother tongue. Or even, for example, the Bible. Like we mentioned before, the Bible has been translated into many languages, so you can get a copy in English in your mother tongue. So this was something that I found extremely helpful because I had already read it in English and in Portuguese. So when I was studying French, even though I didn't know many words, like that word shepherd, just because I knew what the text was saying, it helped me associate and learn many words very quickly. Let me show you an example here. So you can see that I have a copy of eSword, a Bible program, and I have two translations, the Darby version in English and the French Darby version in French. So that way I can compare the words that I'm reading in French with the words that I'm seeing in English. So if you have a translation like this to go along with the text you're studying, it's extremely helpful. So once you've gone through, guess the words in the parentheses, and you've compared them with the original text if you have it, now you can actually go check with a translator to see if you got those words right, and so you can learn the words that you still aren't sure of. There's several tools that you can use and things that you can do. The first is simply translate the phrase in Google or another translator. It's usually a little bit different than what you saw previously. It may use another word that you know. So now that you've guessed the meanings of the words that you marked up and you've compared them with the original, you're going to go check with a translator and see if your guesses were correct and to learn the words that you still don't know. So when you check with a translator, there's several things you can do. You can translate the phrase. You can focus on trouble words that even after seeing in the original text and translator you don't understand. There's going to be false cognates that you're going to have trouble with, and there's going to be those words that you're still not going to understand. So I'm going to show you how to deal with each of those individually. First thing you can do is take that same phrase that you're studying and just copy and paste it in a translator like Google Translator, because this will give you different words. Even though it's the same text that you're translating from English, you're going to get different words. So you'll see synonyms, different meanings, different possibilities that you can compare with and play with. Let me show you some examples here. You can see that in that sample text from earlier where I guessed shepherd and farmer. You can see my first guess here was correct. I put shepherd and the translator also translated it as shepherd. However, this word that I put farmer, you can see that here Google translated as tiller. It's okay. Two words that are different in English but have the same meaning in French. So this was good for me because I learned another meaning of that same word. So now let's take a look at trouble words. How can you focus on those? And I'm going to show you an example from my own studies. However, you can see that this word here that I translated as farmer is giving another meaning in English. Tiller. Now, tiller and farmer are similar words, possibly synonyms, but let's go ahead and break that down and let's focus on this trouble word, okay? Let's see what it means when we narrow down our choices. Now you can see here that when we eliminate all of the text around it and we just leave this word, we have several different meanings here. Cultivator and some other synonyms. And over here, when we break it down, it's translated plowman, which is another synonym of tiller. So we can see tiller, husbandman, plower, plowman, or plowboy. Now this clarifies the word for me. It really helps me understand what this word means in French. So if you have a word that's giving you trouble, go ahead and delete all the other text around it and focus just on this single word. From French into English, which is what I'm studying here, you're going to do English to your mother tongue, and then you can see other synonyms and other meanings of that same word in both languages. So now let's look at a type of word that tends to give students a lot of trouble, which are false cognates. Now, false cognates are complicated because cognates, as you know, are words that are very similar in English and your mother tongue. For example, like we can say animal in English is animal in Portuguese. So they're very similar. Even just by looking at the word, if you've never seen that word before, you can still guess its meanings and probably be right. However, false cognates are difficult because they look similar, but they're not. They have different meanings, and so they trick you. That's why we call them false cognates. So an example of this in English would be pretend. In Portuguese, pretend is fingir. But we have the word in Portuguese called pretender, which means to intend. So oftentimes when a Brazilian student wants to say that they intend to do something, eu pretendo fazer algo, they use the English word pretend. They confuse the word pretend with pretender. Totally different meanings, and so that can be confusing for English students. Now, how do you deal with that? Let me show you an example from my French learning. You can see that here is this word, and I translated it as chastise. Now, this is a classic case of false cognate. I assumed that this word means to chastise. Now, I could have said chases because it's close also, but in the context, Cain was being cursed, he was being punished, and so I automatically assumed that this was chastise. Remember, I was just guessing. I'd never seen this word before, but this is what I thought it meant. However, when I came into the translation here, it had driven me, and I didn't understand what he meant by driven me. Okay, behold, thou hast driven me today this land. And that didn't make any sense. So I went ahead and broke it down by deleting the rest of the text around it. So let's see what happens. So here you can see that this word in French means to hunt. When we deleted all the other text around it, we got hunt. Now driven me, to hunt is different. So when we look down here, I realized, okay, chase. It means to drive out, to chase me from the land, and that made sense. So if I had just considered the actual cognate, chase, which would have been a lot closer, I would have guessed it. My guess was wrong, but by comparing these meanings, I'm learning different meanings and contexts for this word and different comparisons in English. So this is a great way to really increase and refine your vocabulary in some different languages. Now let's take a look at another example. What happens when you have a word that you just don't get at all? A word that you really don't understand even after you've studied it, focused on it, and tried to figure it out. What do you do then? Let me show you another example from my French lesson. So I had this word right here in French. I couldn't even guess what it meant. Here I looked at the translation. It went out. Then Cain went out from the face of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod east of Eden. And I was like, okay, went out. Went out really doesn't make sense with this word here. So how am I going to narrow that down to figure out what it means? And when I did that, I cut everything out here. Then it gave me the translation departed, and then I understood. So Cain departed. He left and he went away. Okay, so you'll see that even your translations sometimes are a little bit confusing, like went out instead of went away. But when you break it down and narrow down the focus, then you can see what the word means, departed, and you can really narrow those words down and learn what those vocabulary meanings are so that you can increase. So when you eliminate the text around it, delete everything else around it, and just focus on that single word, then that will help you narrow down the meaning of those vocabulary words that you're learning to help you really grasp them and understand them and wrap your hands around them so that you can assimilate them and make them a part of your own language learning process. Okay, so we've guessed the words, we've compared the text to the original, we've checked with a translator, and then if you want, you can still look up the meaning in a dictionary. Or if you don't have the translator, you don't have access to the internet, you can just use a dictionary. I did this for a while when I was traveling for a month or so. I didn't have a very good internet connection, and so I just used an offline dictionary. Or even sometimes, even when I was still confused about a word, I would just go straight to the dictionary. So let me show you an example here of the word care in a dictionary. This is QuickDic. It's a free dictionary that I downloaded off the internet. I had it installed on my computer. So while I was studying German, whenever I had doubts about a word, I could go and look it up. So I had a question about the word care, how to say care, and then it gives me different meanings for that word in German. So learning vocabulary words isn't hard. It just takes some time. You have to try to figure out what you think those words mean. You create a hypothesis. Learning new words in English isn't complicated. It's actually fairly simple. It just takes a little time. You're like a scientist. You look at the word in the context and you try to guess what it means. Okay, a scientist, he analyzes something, he observes a phenomenon, and he creates a hypothesis. He says, okay, I think this is what happens. And so he creates an experiment to try it out and to see if his hypothesis is true in different situations. And if it's not, then he has to go back. He says, okay, this is how this phenomenon works. It works differently in this situation. So what happened? So he creates another hypothesis, and he creates different hypotheses until he finds one that seems to work in all situations, and it becomes a theory, And then if it's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, it becomes a scientific fact. So we had people observe that everybody fell if they were dropped. For a while, nobody knew what gravity was, but they observed that everything fell when it was dropped. And so they created the theory of gravity, which was developed by Isaac Newton. And then it went on to become something that's accepted today as a fact that we are held down to the earth by gravity. So I want you to think of yourself as a scientist when you're learning new vocabulary words in English. You're going to see a new word, and you're going to think, I think this word means this. You're going to guess what it means, just like I showed you. And you're going to create your hypothesis about how you think that word is used. And then you can create new sentences with it and try it out. So then you can go and actually study that word, compare it with the original, check with a translator or in a dictionary and see if it really means that or not. And once you've figured out what it means, then you can start using it and practicing it when you speak so that you can actually internalize that word and make it a part of your vocabulary. Now, once you've figured out what the word means, it's important to write them down so you can review them frequently. Because if you don't, if you just see a word and then you go on and you don't review it or see it again right away, you'll most likely forget it. Common student problem. Oh, I learn new words and I forget them. Students complain about that all the time. So what do you have to do? You have to review them frequently. There was actually a scientist who developed a theory he called the forgetting curve or the learning curve, where he actually figured out how fast people forgot. I think like after an hour, we forget 50% of what we learn. Before you see that word again, the more you'll forget it. So if you use tools like a flashcard or a spaced repetition system or a personalized dictionary, it will help you organize the words that you're learning so you can review them frequently. So let's look at these. Flashcards are just simply a piece of paper with the English word on one side that you're learning and the translation on the other side in your mother tongue. Or if your English is already well advanced, you can write the word in English on one side and the meaning, the definition of the word on the other side. And then you can just put them in your pocket when you're walking down the street and you're stuck in the line at the bank or you're riding on the bus. You can pull them out to review frequently so you don't forget those words. If you want to go a little more tech on us, and you want to be more advanced, you can use a spaced repetition system, an SRS. So this is simply a systematic way to review your words. It organizes the words so that you only focus on the words you don't know. If you just use flashcards, you can be reviewing words that you already know, that you've already learned, and you're just wasting time studying those words that you've already internalized. So by using a spaced repetition system, you see the word, if you know it, you mark it as learn, and it goes off and it won't be shown to you as frequently as if you see a word in English, you don't know what it means, and you mark it as not learn, it will be shown to you more frequently. Program itself will actually control how often you see each word. There's many programs like this that you can use online, like Anki, for example. So there's many programs online that you can download and use that will actually do this for you automatically. There's programs like Anki. There's other systems like Memrise that have this built into the study software. So if you're interested, just go ahead and do a search on Google for Spaced Repetition System software, and you can download one and start using it. Also, once you learn those words, you can add them to your personalized dictionary. Personalized dictionary is just simply a notebook or even a telephone book where you organize the new words that you're learning. So you can write them down. You can have a section for each letter of the alphabet, like the first section's for the words with the letter A, the second one for words with the letter B, and so on. So if you learn the word with the letter A, for example, abandon, you're studying for the TOEFL, and you see the word abandon and you don't know what it means, so you go, you figure it out, you learn it, you write it down on your flashcard or put it in your spaced repetition system, and then you write it down in the A section of your personalized dictionary and create a couple sentences for it. So actually the first sentence you write can be the sentence where you saw it in context. So take that sentence right out of the text and immediately write it down after the word. And then you go ahead and create another sentence. And then you can look for another example online or in another place in that same text. Or you can even create your own sentences using that same word. And then every once in a while, you can go back through those words and review them so that you don't forget them. So there you have it. In the integrated learning system, the third step, increasing your vocabulary. You've listened, you've read, and now you're starting to learn the words that you didn't know. This will help you comprehend even more of what you listened to and read before. And you're going to do that by guessing the meanings of the words, comparing your text with the original if you have it. If you don't, just jump right into checking it with a translator. And if you don't have a translator, go ahead and use the dictionary. It takes a little bit more time, but it still works. And then, of course, write down the words for your review. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or something wasn't clear, please leave a comment. If you have an experience from your own language learning that you'd like to share with us, I'd love to hear it. And of course, if you have tips or resources that you'd like to share with the other students watching this video, please feel free to leave that in the comments as well. And of course, share the video with your friends and family. They appreciate it and we appreciate it because we're really excited to have this opportunity to share this information with as many people as want to learn and improve their English. So y'all have a great day, God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.